Thank you guys so much for coming and taking time out of your summers and to come listen to this presentation. I want to thank We Shall Read for putting on their summer literacy series. I've been to a couple of these trainings now, and every one that I've been to have been amazing. So if you can, I would go back and watch some of them. I have so many things that I've taken from them, and I'm going to use in the fall. So my presentation today is about how I'm using decodable text in my small group instruction. And so these are the things that I just kind of want to cover today. So first, you'll get to know a little bit about me and my science of reading journey. We'll figure out what are decodable texts and how I'll explain how I use them in small groups. And then I'll talk about how I've been using brain-friendly reading and how my second grade team and I took that and used that for our phonics instruction as well as our spelling work for the week. So just a little bit about me. This is my 7th year teaching. I've taught 2nd through 5th grades. I'm a 2nd grade teacher, and my average class size is about 28. I'm a graduate of CMU, Fire Up Chips, and I've been married to that guy in the picture. We have 1 daughter, 2 cats, and I love to read and cook in my spare time. And my science of reading journey really started in the spring of the 2020-2021 school year. We were sitting together in our last PLC, and our district had provided us with the power standards, what we needed to teach to help kids coming out of the pandemic fill those gaps. And a lot of them talked about phonics, phonemic awareness, and all of those basic building blocks of literacy. And those, we sat together and we went, we don't really know how to teach phonics. And that was our biggest deficit. And that was the biggest thing that we noticed that we needed to be doing. And so I love this quote from Nick Miller from New Girl. I'm not convinced I know how to read. I've just memorized a lot of words. And I think that kind of sums up how we approached reading previously. It was like sight word drills and those kinds of things, Dolch words, sight words, fry words. And we weren't really teaching kids how to decode, how to what strategies can they use when they get to a word that they don't know besides guessing. And so that kind of started me thinking, okay, I need to figure out how I'm going to teach phonics in the fall, because I know kids coming in, they've lost essentially a year or more of school going back and forth from virtual to in-person. And so I started looking at first Jan Richardson's word study program. And I read her book, and I tried to figure out how I'm going to incorporate this in what I was already doing. And then it was summer break. So in between playing with my daughter and, while she was napping, I downloaded TikTok, and I found the science of reading on TikTok. And in my handout, I've linked some amazing content creators that are teachers that provide strategies aligned with science of reading. And I've implemented so many of those in my classroom. And so really finding those content creators and getting to see what strategies were working in their classrooms kind of helped me introduce me to this idea of the science of reading. And so the fall came, and I'm trying to fill gaps. You're trying to plug holes. You're seeing, oh my gosh, these babies are coming in and they're very, very low. They don't have the strategies. They don't have the print knowledge of even opening a book correctly or where's the author. And so, it was just a struggle at the beginning of the year. And Jan Richardson's word study program wasn't working. And in October, our district had brain-friendly reading come in, and they gave us the charts and they taught us how to implement the arm spelling. And we went, oh my gosh, I think this is it. I think this will work. And so from about October to December, we took a break from what we were doing and said, okay, let's go back and let's start from the beginning with short vowels using this brain-friendly reading strategies, and let's work our way through. And we did that. And during that time, I signed up for every classroom coaching position every classroom coaching opening that I could. And Kristen, who provided all of our trainings, who did all of our trainings for brain friendly reading, came into my classroom. She modeled lessons. She watched me teach. She sat with me as I asked questions, and I said, okay, well, what do you think about this? And can I do this? And just getting that feedback was so important. And I really attribute everything that I'm going to show you today to kind of her like help. So before we talk about how I'm using the decodable texts in my classroom, I want to talk about what are they. So decodable texts use words that the students have skills to decode. So at the beginning of the year, I'm second grade, so we start with short vowels. So our decodable readers will only have a few sight words and short vowels that they have the ability to decode. And using the arm spelling strategies, that's kind of how we help them segment and blend those words and decode them. This picture here is from the Journeys blended books that I use as part of the district provided curriculum. And as you can see, this is not a short vowel decodable text, because this text has short vowels, closed syllables, R-controlled vowels, long vowels. So at the beginning of the year, this text is not decodable for a student who does not have the background knowledge, does not know their R-controlled vowels, does not know the sneaky E, doesn't know the vowel teams. So decodable texts are texts that students have the skills to decode. They've had the explicit instruction on how to decode the words they will find in the text. You might be thinking, all right, well, Journeys provides leveled readers, and I've been using leveled readers for my guided reading instruction so far. Why should I switch over? And so far, these are the main 4 reasons why I've loved using the decodables in my classroom. They're short. The Journeys decodables are only 4 pages and still provide explicit practice. There's still enough of a story to talk about comprehension. And so every student will finish the decodable reader with me in small group at least twice when they meet with me. So I meet with my groups 2 times a week. So I know that they'll have finished the story at least 4 times. My leveled readers, we were barely finishing in one group, and then we had to come back and pick up where they left off. And so I love that even though they're short, they're still powerful, explicit instruction. They're accessible because they're skills-based. Whereas your leveled readers, you knew that if you're a level M, you're reading this book, but your level M's, sometimes they don't have the skills to decode those words, or they're maybe fluently reading at a level M, but they're not comprehending at a level M. And so the decodable readers, all of my students were able to find success reading a decodable versus a leveled reader, which kind of goes into my next point, which is the groupings are extremely flexible. My groups, as you'll see in a minute, are multifaceted. I had kids leaving my room multiple times to work with reading aids, speech teachers, resource room. And so I needed to be able to pull whoever was in my room at the time, and this allowed me to do that because it was skills-based and instead of leveled-based. So I knew that I had explicitly taught how to decode our controlled vowels. So that's what we were going to work on in my small group. And I knew that I could pull a group and just have them ready and be at my table. The other thing I really liked is that they are printable. They're a paper book. So I knew that I could send them home and parents would see, oh, this is what they worked on in small group today, or this is what they're working on in small group this week. I knew that they had these books at home that they could practice reading. And I would tell them, okay, take this home. Now that we're done with it, I want you to read it to 3 different people at home. And so hopefully they were doing it. But if not, I would say, okay, read it to your dog, read it to your stuffed animal, whoever is going to sit and listen to you read this book. So what do my small groups look like? So my small groups ran every day, and for about 45 minutes, that was our Title I intervention time. And they fluctuated between 5 to 6 groups. My groups were extremely fluid, and they changed at least every week or 2, depending on students passing BAS levels, the Functional Benchmark Assessment System, or whether or not a student was quarantined for that week and weren't in school. And so our district said that for our small group time, We were supposed to be using the Jan Richardson guided reading model, and we were expected to meet with each group at least twice. And so I broke up my groups into the MTSS tiers. So tier 1, I had about 15 students that exclusively met with me. I was the only small group instruction they were getting. Tier 2 were it ended the year with about 6 students who met with me and then also met with a reading aid during the same time. So that's why my groups needed to be flexible. I needed to be able to pull whoever I could, because if someone was meeting with a reading aid, I needed to still be able to meet with a group and use my time effectively. And then tier 3, there were 5 students. I ended the year with 5 students who met with the resource room teacher, and their small group instruction was provided by that resource room teacher. Up at the top 2 pictures on my screen, those are just how I kind of created my groups. I had some NWEA RIT level based groups, and then I had some BAS level groups. But my groups were very, very flexible. Journeys was nice enough to include 2 different books for the same phonics pattern. So I was able to differentiate just a little bit, but still using the decodable. So some of my lower groups had less words on a page, and some of my higher groups, had more words on a page. So I was able to differentiate a little while still using a decodable text. And then the picture down in the bottom is just how I kind of wrote notes for myself. This guided reading binder I did not make. It is also linked in the handouts. You can buy it. It's been super helpful in organizing my guided reading binder. And I just had all of that ready. So each week there was a new paper. The yellow is the highlights. I would record who is absent. I would put down what we did each day, and notes about individual kids, like, oh, so-and-so needed extra help blending, so-and-so needed extra help with comprehension or retelling, those kinds of notes. So now I have a group of kids in front of me, and we would start by getting our book. Every kid would get a paper book. We would put our name on it, and we would talk about the pattern for the week. I had sound charts at my table, the brain friendly reading sound charts as well, which are also linked in my handout. You can have a copy of how I formatted that. And so this book I'm actually using in summer school right now. So this is the book we were reading this week, and it's a long A with the sneaky E. So we would tap our sound chart with that sound, A-E-K-A, and then I would say, okay, what words in our title match that pattern? We would talk about it. And then on the inside of the book, this first picture here, this is something I made that I added in, and Kristen kind of said, I think it would be better if you, instead of having them go through and find the words without having any knowledge, she said, okay, I highly recommend introducing those pattern words first. And so that's exactly what we did. So on the back of our blended books, on the back of the decodable readers it provides all of the words that match that pattern. So I would keep that in front of me, and I would say, all right, so our first word was 8. Let's spell the word 8. Oh, this only has 2 sounds. 8, 8. All right, go ahead and write it. And then I would have them highlight the pattern as they wrote it as well. So as the books got more and more complex, the spelling patterns got harder. There were able to be more pattern words in the text. So I had to break this part up in 2 days. I would do half the pattern words on the first day, and then we would finish the pattern words on the second day. So once we've introduced the words, they've practiced arm spelling, segmenting, and blending and writing those pattern words, then we would flip back to the cover. And this is the only picture they're given on the first day. So this is where I would kind of take some of those Jan Richardson strategies, and I would build in the background knowledge needed to understand the book. I would preview any vocabulary that wasn't a pattern word, that wasn't decodable. I would have the students make predictions about what they think they think the story is going to be about. So this is Kate Has Frames, and I would say, all right, what do you think? What do we put in frames? Why do we put things in frames? Those kinds of background knowledge strategies. And then I would say, okay, so if this story is Kate Has Frames and we know we put pictures in frames, what do you think this story is going to be about? The picture on my slide here is an R-controlled vowel at the food mart. And so, what do you buy at a mart? What do you get there? So after we've built in those pre-reading strategies, they have enough background knowledge to understand the story. Then students would read the text on their own, but there are no pictures. The reason why I had this brainchild to take the pictures out is my students, because they were so low, one of the only strategies they had was looking at the pictures for clues on how to decode. And while that is such a useful strategy, or it can't be their only strategy. And that's what I was seeing. It was also because I would ask them to tell me what happened on the page, and they would just describe what the picture was. And I needed to know, wait a minute, can you retell me this story just from reading the words on the page? Because some things that they are going to come into contact with when they're reading aren't going to have pictures. Pictures are few and far between on NWEA and MSTEP. Pictures are few and far between. They can be few and far between in real world print when they get to chapter books. So taking the pictures out was very, very interesting because it made students rely on other strategies to decode as well as retell. Also, I was reading this really interesting article just this week, and so I had to change my presentation. But if you click on this picture here, if you download my slides, you click on this picture, there is an article on it's a study that they did on the use of what extra illustrations and extra pictures and how that affects comprehension. And they determined that in leveled readers or picture books that are beautifully illustrated, comprehension actually declined because there was too much on the page to look at. So very, very interesting article. I highly recommend you read it. I was like, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense. Yes, because they're too busy focusing on other things and they're not reading the words on the page. So that's day one. When they're done, when the time is up, they know that this book has to stay in their book bag that they keep at school, because when they come and meet with me a second time, they bring this book back. If there's extra time, I always keep my brain-friendly reading training companion open to the lesson page in my small group, because if there's extra time left over in my small group, I say, okay, get your expo markers out and we'll do dictation sentences. We'll practice arm spelling, and we'll just get an extra layer of practice in that way. Day two, as I said, if I didn't finish writing the pattern words on day one, we arm spell and write again. And then on the second day, they're going to go back and they're going to highlight and find those pattern words again. Day one, I made my students use a yellow highlighter, and day two, my kids loved it because they got to pick whatever color highlighter they wanted. I'm obsessed with TikTok. I just saw on TikTok yesterday glitter highlighters, and I think I might be purchasing some of those for the fall. Kristen said, let them use a fancy pen, a crayon, anything, just to kind of get that extra practice, that repetition, just to find that pattern again in the text. So after they've read a page and they've found it for the second time, and this is hopefully the third time at least that they're reading this story, they will get a picture page. And after they finish a page, they have to stop and they have to think, okay, and they have to find the picture that matches. And once they find that picture, they have to write the page number next to that picture. The other part of the Jan Richardson model is where when you're meeting with your group, everyone's reading at their own pace, and you are individually listening to each student read. You're talking about it. You're prompting for decoding strategies. You're asking them comprehension questions. You're asking them to just tell you what they just read. And so on day one, I'm monitoring for comprehension, prompting, decoding strategies. But on day two, I am asking them to justify why they picked the picture that they did. So, okay, tell me a little bit more. How do you know that this picture matched this page? And it was amazing to see that they would have to go back and reference the text that they read to tell me why that picture matched. And if they picked the wrong picture, I would say, okay, hold on, let's go back. Let's reread this page. And then you have to tell me why that picture is not the right one. And so they have to get a little extra. They have to go a little bit more in depth. Oh, wait a minute. I see that while Dave and Nate are in this picture, this one they're running and they're in a race. Oh, okay. So this is why Nate and Dave, this picture matches page number 2 instead of Dave and Nate in the waves. If there's extra time for my higher groups, I then would have them put this page in the middle of their book, put it under the seat. And for my higher groups, we read a Magic Treehouse book, and we did a little bit of a book study. So they got more exposure to not just decodable text, but real world text as well. For my lower groups, if I had time, I would read a different book, or we would go back and do dictation sentences. When they left me, they would take their picture page and their book, they would take it back to their seat, and they would cut out the picture and glue it to the correct page. And then they would take this book home with illustrations this time. And I would say, okay, make sure you're reading this to at least 3 friends, 3 people in your house. And I loved that they had a huge collection of books that they could access at home. I originally had them cut this out and glue it at my table, and that was such a waste of time. Don't do it. They can do that independently.
Alex, do you have whole group reading with a district mandated curriculum?
Journeys is a whole group curriculum. So it provides our mentor, like our weekly reader, like the story we read each week, the comprehension strategies, vocabulary, everything like that.
So these lessons are your differentiation time.
Yes, exactly. This is not my whole group reading instruction at all. During the week, we have one story. We have a comprehension strategy that we're practicing in our book bag books, like that are not decodable, in our independent reading, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Do you use the same decodable text with all levels?
No. So Journeys provides, there's 2 different books with each skill. So sometimes the difference is minimal. Sometimes there is a bigger difference between the 2 texts. So it honestly depended on the phonics skill on whether or not every student read the same text or if I had 2 different versions. So this is the AIAY, and so this is Snail's Mail Trail, and then there's Sunday Trip. So I have 2 different texts, 2 different decodables for the same pattern at 2 different levels. The next part is how we took brain-friendly reading and we used it for our spelling grades and our weekly spelling instruction. So the brain-friendly reading lessons, I know it's a 3-day model, but we took it and we did 1 lesson a week. The downfall of that is that we did not get through all of those really, great lessons in this book, but we prioritized what they needed to know. And so after having used the brain-friendly reading strategies, we were getting ready to start back up our spelling tests because we decided we needed to stop, go back to short vowels, and work our way forward using these brain-friendly reading strategies. And we are getting ready as a team to start our spelling test back up, our weekly spelling test back up. And Kristen was in my room and I asked her, I said, okay, so what does a brain-friendly reading spelling test look like? And she said, well, ideally, it would be random words that match a pattern that students haven't memorized, because we wanted to move from a rote memorization to a skills-based spelling test approach. And so everything that Kristen had suggested had worked so well that I was like, all right, let's do it. So we came up with this handout, which is linked in the presentation, and I do believe I also share it on the handout. But this is what parents would get instead of a weekly list of words. We took the word list from the training companion and put it on the paper that parents would get. And we said, okay, here is the 50 words that match this pattern. This is our spelling pattern for the week. We are going to have direct, explicit instruction in this spelling pattern, decoding, writing practice. These are some of the words that could be on this spelling test. And we even say right on the handout, please do not have your student copy, rewrite every word on this list multiple times. We know that that's not an effective use of your time. So we provided on the backside just some strategies that they could use to practice at home. We provided sound charts at home. We sent home links to the Brain Friendly Reading YouTube videos on how to arm spell, how to chart tap. So they could be doing all of those things to practice the weekly spelling pattern at home. And so we had no weekly lists. There was not a set list of words anymore. And so every day we would tap the chart, we would arm spell, and we would write those words. And the beautiful thing was that the spelling pattern that we were using from the training companion matched the decodable reader that they were getting in small group. So not only were they getting a whole group instruction, they were getting a second practice during the day in that small group instruction, small group setting. We were also using the spelling games. My other second grade teachers really loved the Go Fish. I have Do You Have. I loved those as reading games. My kids really loved bingo to practice spelling. So on Thursday, we would turn our whiteboards, our personal whiteboards, into a bingo board. And I would use this as kind of like a practice test, because on Thursdays, they knew I did not write the words with them. I would help them we would arm spell together, but they were responsible for writing and spelling the word correctly on their bingo board. And they loved that. So they loved winning bingo. And I would give Cougar Cash or stickers or whatever incentive for earning the bingo. And I would play almost until everyone won. But toward the end, they could not earn a bingo if the word was spelled incorrectly. So there was an incentive to make sure that the word is spelled correctly on your bingo board. On Fridays, our tests were 10 words, but they were random words. So some words we would have arm spelled and practiced together in that whole group or small group setting. Kids loved it when the spelling words were also in the decodable reader. But there were some words that they had never seen. And I would always keep one or two words that we hadn't practiced during the week and included those in my spelling test as well. And so you might be thinking, okay, well, but how did your kids actually do on them? And so the orange over here was my class average, 82. My spelling test average was an 82%. I had kids passing spelling tests that had never passed a spelling test earlier in the year because they had a strategy to decode the word instead of just guessing. The other spelling assessment they took throughout the year was the Words Their Way spelling inventory. This is that assessment that's not necessarily measuring can they spell the word correctly, but can they hear a specific part of the word and use that letter sound correspondence and spell that part correctly. 73% of my students made a year's growth on the Words Their Way spelling inventory. Next year, however, I went to Elise's training on the use of the phonics screener that's included in the training companion. Next year, I will, I've already actually started using the phonics screener at summer school with my summer school kiddos. And it's amazing how many of them don't know all of their letter sounds. And so I think next year, I plan on using, instead of Words Their Way, I'm going to use the phonics screener in addition to Words Their Way. But if you haven't watched Elisa's training, I highly recommend going back and downloading all of her materials. She gives you everything you need. But so that's the spelling component. On the reading side, we used, for our reading assessments, we took the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment and the NWEA. On BAS, which is a reading assessment where they're sitting with me, they're reading a story, they're retelling the story and answering questions about it, 92% of my students made their year's growth on Fountas and Pinnell. It's about 4 levels. So they're expected to come in at like an IJ and end at an M. Many of my students started at an A, and some of them made it to a D, some of them made it much farther, but 92% of them made at least a year's growth on BAS. On NWEA, 69% of my students met their yearly growth on NWEA. Last year, it was only 53. And I have no data for BAS last year because we didn't take it in the fall. And so there wasn't a fall to spring score last year. So I have nothing to compare that to. This slide is just a little bit of an extra look at my NWEA and that Words Their Way assessment data. So Words Their Way is on the right here. Many of my students came in not even being able to identify the initial consonant in a word. And they were at that kindergarten spelling stage. At the end of the year in May, most of my students had made it to the 1st or 2nd grade list, and some were still right at the end of kindergarten. On the left over here, you'll see in the fall, my average RIT score was a 167, and in the spring, it was a 184. And while a lot of them were still below the 50th percentile, I did see a lot of movement. I saw a lot of upward growth. And I saw so much progress just in their like daily writing as well. And I think the other like non-data piece that I saw was that students were able, it wasn't necessarily about spelling the word 100% correctly anymore. It was spelling it as closely as they could get it to be able to be understood. And all of my students were able to do that. So it was great to see they felt more confident in their writing. They weren't coming up to me every word. How do I spell? How do I spell? They were able to be more fluent writers because they had a strategy to sound out a word instead of just me saying, well, sound it out. And they were like, well, how do I do that? And this gave them that. Our school is lucky enough to have a book room, and the book room is leveled, so it matches our Fountas and Pinnell levels. So I don't know if maybe that's what you mean by like not curriculum, but each kid in my classroom gets a book bag of books that are at their BAS level. So technically it's not necessarily decodable. Like it doesn't follow, it's not a phonics pattern book, but it's just like a book that they could go to the library and pick out. So it's not necessarily provided by Journeys, but it's still in our library and it's still leveled. So I hope that answers the question. But yes, I do use non-Journeys provided materials.
Do all students get the same list, spelling list, even tier 1 students?
Yes, that is a great question. Yes, all students do get the same list, even tier 1 students. In years past, I would have parents say, oh, well, these spelling words are too easy. But I didn't necessarily have that this year. It could just be that words were appropriate, or it could just be, the random nature of it kind of took out the easy factor, maybe.
Did you play bingo as a whole group?
Yeah, I did. Kristen came in and provided, like, showed me how I could do the games in a small group setting. And I think maybe Megan Rader's training yesterday provided some small group strategies besides just guided reading. So that might be a good avenue to, go back and watch her presentation. But yes, bingo, I played whole group.
Another question, are you going to use both the words their way and the phonics screener?
I realized that the words their way is more of a spelling assessment. The phonics screener is more of a reading assessment. The words their way, we were lucky enough to have the reading aides come in and give the assessment and mark all of the like scores for us. So if they're going to do that again for us, I'll do both. If not, I probably will only use the phonics screener, and then I'll just use the weekly spelling test as their like spelling assessment grades, because we do grade spelling on our report card.
All right, and then this one's a clarification. We know you mentioned that you use 2 different level decodables for different levels, but do all students work on the same phonics skills? Teaching a vowel team AI, every student practices that in the same group?
Yes. For the week, our whole group weekly phonics pattern is the same. Yes. What I really liked, or what I've liked about using the phonics screener so far, just with my summer school kids, is it gave me a little bit more of oh, they're still missing short vowels. They're still missing diagraphs. They're still missing this. So next year, my goal is, Elise said that she does a combination of reading groups as well as phonics groups. And so my plan for next year is how to make this better is that, yes, I will still make sure everyone is getting the decodable reader with our phonics skill in it, but I will start having groups that use like a phonics strategy, and we'll just get phonics practice. Like if they're still, like, even if we've passed short vowels, but they're still working on short vowels, I still want to meet with those kiddos. So I really was able to, I got so much out of Elise's presentation to make what I'm doing even better for next year. So, but I see what they're saying is that there needs to be differentiated phonics instruction besides just the weekly skill. Yeah.
How often will you give the phonics screener?
So Elise, I'm taking all of this from her. I'm going to try and she gave it once a month and just gave it to the kids that were like falling behind. So, if you were working on short vowels and you didn't even have a kid at short vowels and you had letters and sounds, you would go back and give, once you've met with them and worked in their small group with letters and sounds, then you'd go back and give that phonics screener the next month and see if they knew all their letters and sounds.
Heard Elise say this as well. I'm assuming based on what you said, you would just give the parts of it that you need as far as the phonics. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to thank all of you who logged on today. If you like this presentation, please leave us a positive review on the We Shall Read Facebook page. And also, if you are interested in expanding your skill set for tutoring, classroom teaching, or any other teaching environment, We Shall Read does offer 2 structured literacy courses. The one is titled Brain Friendly Reading Level 1, and it is a self-paced, asynchronous, Orton Gillingham-based training. And you will learn effective reading and spelling strategies based on brain research and the latest science of reading. So the training is on sale right now for only $125. And those of you who are interested in starting a tutoring business, we also offer a Mentor Me reading tutor training. That's hard to say. Reading tutor training, which includes everything from the level 1 course. Plus you get a great deal of additional support in the form of one-on-one mentoring while you're taking the training, and also after you complete the training and begin to work with students or begin to start your own business. So you can register and learn more about those 2 trainings at brainfriendlyreading.org or weshallread.org.
Thank you guys so much for coming. My email is listed. So again, I apologize, I can't share the blended books with you, but if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'm working summer school, so I check my work email all the time. I hope you guys enjoy your summer. Have a restful summer. Thank you. Bye.
You.